everyone, welcome to the watercolor video class. This is the last in our series of 3 watercolor classes that we've been offering on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. Today we are going to paint with a plastic bag, and we are also going to paint with plastic wrap. So this is what you're going to need to do this project. You're going to need some watercolor paints, some watercolor brushes, a container with water, some water-based markers, and these Crayola work really good for this. They can be thin markers or thick markers, it doesn't matter. A quart-sized plastic bag, some paper towels, some watercolor paper cut to the size that you want, and some painter's tape, and a spray bottle with some water in. And this just happens to be a small one that I have. All right, so the first technique we're going to work on is painting with a plastic bag. For this, you're going to have your watercolor paper, and this is just a quart-size sealable plastic bag. So what I like to do is put my plastic bag kind of over the top of my paper so I know kind of where my colors are going to end up. So this first one, we're going to use these big markers. And I am just going to scribble some marker on to this plastic bag. And they don't have to be touching each other. And the reason I like to have my paper underneath here is you can kind of see where your colors are going to end up a little bit. So let's put a little bit of green in here, a little bit of blue. And finally, I'm going to put a little bit of purple in here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set that off to the side for a minute. I'm going to take a paper towel and just set it under my paper. And I'm going to take my spray bottle and I'm going to just spritz my paper to get kind of a coating of water on there. Then I'm going to take my plastic bag and I'm going to flip it over and press it onto the watercolor paper, and then I'm going to kind of start smushing with my fingers just to kind of get that paint moving around a little bit. And that's why you want to get the paper wet first, so that the paint will start to move. Okay, I've got that kind of moved around. Now I'm just going to take and I'm going to peel my plastic bag off. Now it's handy to have some paper towels because, as you can see, when you peel it off, sometimes you get a little bit of muddy color down here. So I'm just going to take my paper towel here and just dab that off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take and dry it. And I found my hair dryer works pretty good for this. So I have it set on the highest heat setting, but the lowest air setting. So excuse the noise, we're going to just, whoop, need to have it plugged into the right plug. There we go. Now we're going to dry this a little bit. And it doesn't have to be super dry, it just needs to be a little bit drier so it's not quite so wet. And you can see the paper is kind of flattening out again. All right, we're done with that noisy thing. Okay, so you can see that my plastic bag still has some drips of color on. Now there are a couple spots where the color is kind of muddy, and so I'm going to kind of dab those off a little bit. But because I dried this, I can actually go in and get some kind of paint splatters on here just by dabbing this back onto the paper. And because the paper is dry, that other watercolor is already absorbed into the paper. So you see how you get those mottled color drops? I'm going to just add a few up there. And you can move your plastic bag around to get these. And then you can just let it air dry. So you see how you've got all those spots in there? Just gives it kind of some texture. Now the other fun thing that you can do with this is to just take a dry or a wet paintbrush with just some plain water on it. Now I found that this works really good with the markers, but not so great with the watercolor paints. Because the markers are water-based, this technique works pretty good. So what I'm doing is taking and splattering just the clear water onto my watercolor piece. And you want it to be kind of dry for this. And what happens is, because the markers are water-based, it's going to wick up some of that color. So I'm going to let that sit on there for just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my paper towel and just place it over the top and soak up that water. So then what happens is you get all these white splatters on your piece. And that again adds more texture to it, gives your watercolor piece more depth. So that's kind of a fun thing to do with the markers. So now I'm going to show you that you can also use watercolor paints to do the same type of thing. So we'll set that one aside. We'll move on to another piece. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to just take and clean off my plastic bag here. So I'm just taking a little bit of water and just cleaning off my plastic bag so that I can use it again. Okay, we'll set that aside and set that aside. Alright, so you can do the same type of thing with watercolor paints. So instead of using the markers to paint on the plastic bag, you can just pick up some watercolor paint and just spread it around on your plastic bag. Let's see, we'll add some blue-green here. And I think we'll put some purple in there as well. Okay, so again, we're going to take our paper and just get it wet with the water. And then we're going to flip our plastic bag over the top. And again, you're just going to kind of smush your colors around. It's kind of like finger painting, but without getting quite as messy. So get that kind of where I like it. I'm going to go all the way to the edges on this one. And again, I'm going to just take and kind of quickly peel back my plastic bag. And again, I'm going to take the bottom and just kind of dab off some of that extra ink. Now, if you want this to move a little bit more, say your color isn't moving, you can come in with your spray bottle and just put some sprays of water on there and then just let it sit. And you can also do the same thing with drying this and then going back in with the plastic bag to add your water splatters. So we'll do that again. Again, mind the noise of the hairdryer. Okay, we've got that dry again. Wipe my finger off. Okay, so now I'm going to dab off this little bit that's still sitting there, that's still a little bit wet. And I'm going to go back in with my plastic bag and kind of just add in these droplets that are still left on my bag. And I don't necessarily press the bag all the way down. I kind of just press it in the spots that I want and just kind of dab so that you get some of that, but not there we go. There. So So then again, you can just set that aside to dry. Now I tried the water droplet with this, and I'll kind of show you the results I got. It did not pick up the watercolor as well as it picks up with the markers. And I think that's because the watercolor soaks into the paper a little bit more. So I'm going to show you. You get a little bit of the effect, but it's not quite as much as you get with the markers. But the other thing is, if your watercolor paints have a white in here, you actually can take your white and do the same type of thing. My paint is a little bit dry there. There we go. So now you can just take your white paint and splatter it right on to your piece to get that same type of effect. So there's, a few different ways you can do this. So I'll hold these up side by side so you can kind of see. So here's with the water splatters, and here is with the white paint splatters. So you're not going to get the same type of look, but you get a different look, and I think they're both really nice to do. Okay, so we'll set both of these aside to dry. And I think I'll do one more like this. I'm going to clean off my plastic bag. And this last one we're going to do with just some skinny markers. Okay, I'm going to dry my bag off really good here. Let's see. I think we'll do this skinny piece. I was going to make some bookmarks. So this is just a skinny piece of watercolor paper again. And I'm going to set that over here. And I am going to use just these skinny markers. And I'm going to do just all blues, just so you can get the effect that you can mix colors. You can kind of use the same color family. And this is where the skinny markers, I have a few more colors of these. So that makes it a little bit easier to do this. So I'll add a little bit of each of these colors on here. Alright, I'm going to move that aside. I'm going to take my paper and again spritz it down with water. And the reason you need to spritz it with water is if you don't have any water on there, the paint would just stick to it and it would just look like scribble lines. So the water just helps everything move. Actually, I want that the other direction. Okay, so here again, I'm going to just move my paint around by just pressing my fingers over the plastic bag and just kind of making that watercolor paint move. And then again, I'm going to just peel that up, dab off this extra that's sitting at the bottom. And again, you can let that dry it with the hair dryer, and then go back in and add the splatters from the bag. But you've seen that twice, so I think we'll just put this aside for now, and we'll go to our next thing. So we're going to set that aside. And I did have one of those. I did one previously, so this is kind of what it looked like after I added the splatters and everything back in. So kind of a nice thing, and then I'm just going to put read down there and some cutout letters and put a tassel on it and make it a bookmark. Okay, so the next technique we're going to do is painting with plastic wrap. Now for this particular technique, you need to tape your paper down to a board because this is going to get kind of wet and it needs to sit and dry. So this can be done again with markers or with watercolor paints. I'm going to use the watercolor paints. Again, I'm going to get my paper wet and I'm going to just spread that water out so that I've got good coverage on my piece of watercolor paper. And then I'm going to start dropping in different colors of paint. So I think, let's see, we've done a lot of purples and blues. Let's try some oranges and reds and yellows. Okay, so we're going to add some yellow in there. And I'm just dropping color in. And I have noticed with this particular technique, the darker the color, the more you'll be able to see this. So I'm not quite sure how the yellow is going to work, but we're going to give it a try. I'm going to add in some more. And you can just keep, to get the colors darker, you can just keep adding in color on top of each other. So again, we'll add in some more yellow and some more orange. See, my color is getting quite a bit darker now. So yeah, if you're, just keep adding. There is nothing wrong with that. And you have to kind of work a little bit quickly, not super quickly, but your paint needs to be pretty wet in order for this to work. And we're going to add some more orange. Just going to kind of blend those two together. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Now I've got quite a bit of water excess on the edge here, so I'm just going to sop that up. And same with this side, I'm just going to sop up some of that water, because that's just a little too much for what I want. Okay, so now you're going to take a piece of plastic wrap and you're going to lay it right over the top of that, and then you're going to kind of smush it to make lines. And what happens is where the lines are forming, it's going to make white marks in your background. So you're just going to keep moving this around to get that in there. Sorry, that is my clock dinging in the background. So I hope that doesn't get too loud here. Okay, so I kind of like that, and now you have to let it sit and dry. You can't touch it, you can't pick up and peek, just put it aside and let it dry. So I have one that I already did a little bit earlier, and this should be dry enough that I can take this off. So you can see that I've got all this bunched up in here. So all I'm going to do is peel that back, and you see how you get this really fun crackle technique with this. It looks like my tape is a little wet underneath there yet. So that is what you can do with the plastic wrap. And you can do this with plain colors, you can mix your colors, you can do all blues, it's whatever you want to do. So I have some samples here that I'm going to show you of both techniques. So this is the Crackle Technique. So this is another one that I did in blues and purples. This is one that I did in yellows and greens. And then I wanted to try it with blacks and browns just to kind of see what it would look like, and I think that's really fun. And then here is also a few more samples of the ones done with the plastic bag. So this is one where I just did the rainbow stripes in order. This is one I added the white splatters. This is one I did in greens and yellows. Another one done with purples and greens and pinks. This one got really watered out, but that was kind of fun. And then I also did one where I just did stripes of color on there. So you can do this in so many different ways. You just play around with it, try different things, don't be afraid to try different things. It usually all comes out in the end. So I hope that you've enjoyed these watercolor video classes. I know I've had a really fun time doing them. So again, thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a good day and that everybody is well and healthy. We'll see you again soon at the library. Thanks everyone. Bye.